All right, so the last thing that I want to take a look at here is this. You may have noticed that in our note detail page, defining all of the logic for our sockets and all of the different events that can occur is getting pretty messy, right? And it's especially going to get messy as time goes on and we add more and more of these events. So the question then becomes, how do we actually, encapsulate this and get it out of our note detail page directly? What I'm going to recommend you do is create a custom React hook that will encapsulate all of this logic. And the cool part about this is that it's actually going to encapsulate this logic in such a way that our component won't need to know that it's WebSockets behind the scenes. So here's what I mean by that. What we're going to do is inside our hooks folder here, we're going to create a new file which will be called useNote. Okay, and we'll say useNote.js. And what this custom hook is going to look like, we're going to say export const use note. And this is, of course, going to have to take the note's ID. So we'll just say note ID. And essentially what we're going to do is take all of the logic that's currently inside this use effect hook, as well as some of the state variables of our component. So let me just take those here. And we're going to put them inside use note, just like that. All right, so the way that this is going to work now is our custom use note hook here is going to be the one that will actually make the connection and set up all of the socket events. And the note detail page is going to be able to access and modify the note data just by using some functions that will return from this custom hook. All right, so first of all, let's just import some of the things that we're going to need here. We can do that just by copying and pasting note detail pages imports. There we go, and we're just going to remove the ones that we don't need, which is most of them. But we are going to want to use state, so let's keep that one for the time being. All right, so up here at the top, right, first of all, we're going to have to create a socket state variable to hold this socket here. So we'll say const socket and set socket equals use state. The initial value of this is going to be null. And we're also going to create a state variable for the current state of our note. All right, so what this will look like, we'll say const note, and here we'll say set note equals use state. And this too is going to be null initially. And we'll also want to have an isLoading variable here. Probably we'll say isLoading, set isLoading equals use state, and that'll be true initially. All right, so down in here now, right, once we're connecting to our socket, we're adding this initial note data event, which will give us the initial data for our note, as the name would suggest. So what we're going to do inside of here is, instead of setting all of these things individually, we're just going to say set note to whatever the note is that we got back, right? So set note, that'll give us the note that got sent back from the socket. And we can also just remove this console.log statement there as well. And once we've done that, we're also going to say set isLoading to false. All right, and we're going to run into some other things too that we haven't set up yet. This set is not found. We're going to want to provide a state variable for that as well. So we'll just say const is not found and set is not found. And notice that this is actually a different sort of state variable than we're using for our error. So we'll say is not found, set is not found. That's going to be equals use state. And what we're going to do here is set that to false initially, and we're going to set it to true if the initial note data comes back with nothing. The next thing that we're going to need to do here is this note updated thing. Note updated, what we're going to want to do is basically just set our note to the updated note that came through. So what we'll do here is just say set note to updated note. And that's it for that. Pretty simple, right? So now for our socket.onError, what that's going to look like is we're just going to set a state variable with this error message. So we'll remove that here, and we're going to say set error to error message. We, of course, need to actually go create this error and set error thing up at the top now. So we'll say const error and set error equals use state. And that's going to just be an empty string initially. Cool, so I think that that's all we need to do for that. And of course, we're saying set socket socket, just so that we hold on to it. And what else do we need to do here? Oh, okay, so for this one, we're going to need to actually get the user. Okay, so we can just remove this isLoading thing. And we're just going to call this if user exists. We're going to get that user from our use user hook, which we've defined before. We're going to say import use user from use user. And then up at the top here, or wherever you want, I suppose, we'll just say const user equals use user. All right, and then down here, we're going to remove isLoading from the dependencies, since that now means a different thing than it did before. And that should take care of connecting to our socket for us. And yeah, that should actually be all we need. So we're setting all of this data correctly inside this useEffect hook, but the next thing that we need to do is actually make this data available to the component that's using this custom hook. And the way we're going to do that is by simply returning all of the relevant pieces of data. So what that's going to look like is down here we're going to say return, and we're going to return first of all the note, and then we're also going to return the isLoading, is not found, and error. So isLoading is not found and is error, or not is error, but just plain old error. And additionally, we're also going to have to go into our note detail page and take out this part. Where was it here? Yes, we're going to take out this part and put it in our use note custom hook, right? This part that's responsible for actually emitting this event. So what this is going to look like actually is we're going to just return two functions here. One is going to be update title, and the other is going to be update content. And those are going to be pretty straightforward. All we're going to do is just, well, here, we'll remove this useEffect thing since we don't need that right now. And what we'll do is say const update title. All right, so that's basically just going to take the updated title and say socket.emit with whatever that updated title is. Okay, and in that case, the content we would just want to set to note.content. Oops, and that should be title. There we go. And same thing for the update content. We're going to say const update content equals content, and that's going to be socket.emit update note. And for that, we're going to say title is going to be note.title, right? Whatever the current title of the note is. And then for content, we're going to say content is just equal to that argument there. Cool. So we have both of those functions here, which will take care of emitting the proper event. So essentially what that means is that any component that's using this custom hook will be able to just call these functions and use this data without having any idea that we're using sockets behind the scenes. So what that's going to look like now. Oh, and one more thing that I actually missed is this disconnect from socket thing here. Let me just copy that and paste that underneath where we connect to the socket in the first place. There we go. And now we should be able to go back into our note detail page and remove all of this logic that we had before that had to do with sockets. So we can remove this stuff here. That's gone. We can remove this stuff here. We can remove this stuff here. And additionally, we're also going to need to refactor these things so that they're coming from the use note hook. So we don't need socket anymore. We are going to need is editing. And then I suppose let's just get some of the data from our use note hook. So we'll say const note is not found, error, and what else did we have up here? There we go. Is loading as well we're going to want. So we'll say is loading. And what else? We're also going to need update title and update content. So let's get those right here. We'll say update title and update content. And these are all things that we're getting from our use user hook. So quite a bit of stuff coming from there, but it's all related behind the scenes. And what we're going to need to do next is, instead of having updated title and updated content, we're going to remove those, and we're going to just say const title, content, and role. That's going to be equal to note. All right, now since note may or may not actually exist at this point, we're just going to provide a backup value by doing something like this. We're going to say note equals empty object, and we'll give backup values for title, content, and role as well. There we go. And now we can remove this role state variable since we don't need it, and can edit is going to be role equals edit, just like before. So for is not found, we've already got that from our use user hook, so we can remove that as well. For is loading in user, we don't need that either since that's all encapsulated inside our, oh, actually this should be use note. I accidentally used the wrong custom hook. I didn't realize it until I saw that use user was being used somewhere else, and I was like, wait a minute. Okay, so this should be use note. Sorry about that. And the last thing we're going to want to do is display this error. We removed that earlier in favor of redirecting the user, but I guess we'll just add that back for simplicity's sake. We're going to say if error, then return paragraph class name equals error, and we'll just display error. Oops, there we go. Error. Cool. So the update title and update content things here, and that should be update content, not updated content, those are going to have to be called by our note detail page's inputs when we change the values there. So what that's going to look like is down here for both of our inputs, the value is going to be title and content, right? We're getting those from our use note hook. And for on change here, what we're going to do is say, instead of set updated title, we're just going to say update title. Okay, that's the thing that we got again from our custom hook. And then same thing for our text area here with the notes content. We're going to, instead of saying set updated content, we're going to say update content with that target value. And there we go. So let's give this thing a try now and see if we messed it up. Oh, and we're also going to want to get rid of this is loading from the notes context. We don't even need that anymore at all. And we can get rid of a lot of these imports up here as well. So there we go. We'll just delete those. And let's give this thing a try now. First of all, we're going to want to see if there's any errors, of course. It looks like there are a few, so let's just find updated title. Ah, yes, I forgot to change the JSX. We just need to change this to title everywhere. And for updated content, we're going to need to change that to content everywhere. Oh, and one other thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to actually pass the note ID to our use note custom hook. So we'll say note ID right there, and that should take care of everything. So let's give this thing a try. We're going to go back to here and refresh it. And oops, it looks like we're getting some kind of error here. As a matter of fact, in order for this default value for our note to take effect, we're going to actually just need to set our note default value inside our use note hook to undefined, right? We're just going to leave it blank. And if we refresh now, that should give us everything we need. So let's go back to a note that both of our users have in common just to make sure that everything is still working here. We're going to open up Hello Other Sean, and let's try and make a change here. And it looks like everything is still working there. Cool, so we've refactored everything. So now all of our logic on our front end for connecting to WebSockets is encapsulated inside its own custom hook. So I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.